Hi everyone, and welcome to the good, the bad, and the ugly. In this video, we're going to talk all about visuals. I'm not going to teach you how to use PowerPoint. I am going to give you a few principles you can use to build better slides. Slides that are clear and effective at complementing this wonderful story that you have just spent time crafting. Let's look at an example of a slide that doesn't really hit the mark. A US general leaked this slide to the New York Times back in the 90s with the comment, "When we figure out this slide, we will have won the war because the true enemy is PowerPoint." This slide was presented as a way of explaining the US involvement in Afghanistan. Nobody could make head or tail of it. I'm sure you're having trouble figuring it out. So many colors and lines and places to look. It became known as the spaghetti slide, and one of the most extreme examples of where we can go wrong with PowerPoint. Now, it is pretty extreme, but it's a good reminder of the pitfalls of PowerPoint. There's one place that I like to look for great visual design, great visual complement to the story, and that's billboards. So billboards have a few challenges. The first challenge is, I'm driving. I should be looking at the road, so that billboard needs to get my attention. The second challenge is, I'm driving, maybe 60, 80, 120 kilometers an hour. That message needs to be communicated quickly. And the third challenge is, I'm driving, maybe to the grocery store, daycare, grandpa and grandma's place before heading home. I need to remember that message long after I've looked at it. If you look at this billboard, for example, and think about the three challenges I just described, how does it do? Maybe it grabs my attention, but does it communicate one message really quickly? Is that message going to be memorable long after I've looked at it? I don't think so. So what we want to do is take a cue from those great billboards, like this one from McDonald's. It's very simple, very clear. McDonald's puts the least amount of information on that billboard that it needs to communicate the story. We get it really quickly, and we're probably going to remember it long after we've looked at it, which is really what they're hoping for. They want us to turn right. We want to do what McDonald's did. So let's follow what I like to call the golden rule of billboards. You want to help the viewer to understand and remember. There's no other reason to put anything on your slide other than this reason. If you have information up there that's helping you to remember, you're probably going down a path towards spaghetti slide. So let's stay away from that. I'm going to break this down into 3 principles for you to follow when you're putting your slides together. The first one is that first challenge we knew billboards had to solve for. They needed to get our attention. You gotta love Hot Wheels with this billboard. I wonder how many cars almost crashed trying to figure out if that loop was actually there. So how are we going to get their attention? First of all, let's increase our font size. I know some of you are working with 18, 20. I hope you're working with 18, 20, maybe 24-point font. But here's the thing. This slide, the bullets are done in 24-point font. They're a little hard to read. So not only does your audience need to read them and synthesize them, but they can't even see them in the first place, so they have to squint and lean forward and get frustrated with what they are trying to look at. We took this slide and we wanted to increase the font size, so we actually turned it into 2 slides. Here's our first one. The font size is bigger. We're just talking about the challenge that the Western region faced that particular year. The second slide finishes off the story. In spite of the challenges, that Western region really did perform. Because the font sizes are bigger, our audience knows exactly what they're looking at. Okay, so forget 18, 20, 24-point font. I'm going to give you a new minimum, 30-point font. Oh my gosh, some of you are saying, that is so big. It is. Get used to it. It means you are going to put less on your slide. You are going to choose the information that will help your audience to understand and remember. Here's another test you can do. We all sit in front of our computers building these slides and we think they look great. Well, here's the thing. We're sitting right in front of the screen. Often, our audience isn't. So if you're working on a 15-inch monitor, take 15 steps back from your screen and then look at your visual. Still easy to see? If anything isn't, it needs to be increased in size. This is called the screen size test, and you can use it to make sure your audience is going to be able to read what you've put on your slide. So that's the first way we're going to get their attention, is to increase our font size. What's another way we can do it? Well, we can follow Chipotle's lead here and use color to emphasize. Really easy to see the story on the Chipotle billboard. But on our business slide, it's not always that easy to tell what the story is, especially for building graphs and charts, and this is what we're working with. We're working with one color on our graph or our chart, or maybe we have different colors, but they're all bold. It's hard to tell what we should be looking at in this slide about sales revenue. Is the story about 2017, which was the highest revenue? Is it about 2018, which is the most recent year that we're tracking? Or is it about just the trajectory of the sales? We don't know. I'm looking in one spot, the person next to me is looking in another spot, and you might be talking about something else entirely. So before I get into the color direction, I want to show you this illustration of color. On the left, you're seeing solid red, and on the right, you're seeing solid green. Okay, two nice colors. The problem is, which one is more important than the other? We don't really know. So here's another trick you can do. It's the colorblind test. I've given you a resource at the back of your workbook to be able to go and do this with your slides. You go to vizcheck.com and load up your slide as a JPEG, and it will show you what a colorblind person would see. So we have red and green, but when we run it through VizCheck, this is what it looks like. It's really unclear what is more important now. Why am I talking about color blindness? Well, if a colorblind person can't tell what's important, how does anybody else? I like red, the guy next to me likes green. We're looking in two different places, and you're trying to tell us one story. It doesn't work. So let's take that sales revenue slide and apply what we now know about color, that we can use it to emphasize. Let's take a look at that chart again. Oh, it turns out the story was about 2017 when the sales were the highest. And you've made it really clear now because it's in bold red. Everything else is in a muted gray. You know exactly where the audience is looking, and you can tell your story without confusing them. Two ways to get their attention: increase font size and use color to emphasize. There's a third way, and that is to let your visuals fill the screen. I love this from The Economist. This actually wasn't a billboard, it was a street side ad that filled the wall next to a sidewalk. The light bulb was dimmed, but as soon as someone would walk underneath it, the light would go on. In that simple visual, it tells a story about reading The Economist. But I'll tell you, that visual wouldn't have been nearly as impactful if it had been a little bus stop ad or something tiny on the wall. It filled the space. We want to do that with the visuals in our business presentations. But instead, what we often end up with is something that looks like this. We have a pile of bullet points on the left that are there really so we can remember our presentation. And then we think, I should put a picture on that, get my audience's attention, make it look nicer. But that gets sort of pushed over to the side, and it loses its impact. It loses its ability to communicate that message and get their attention. So what can we do with this slide? I don't know, if you're reading it, you probably are trying to figure out what the story even is. Well, we told this story in 2 slides with powerful visuals that filled the slide. Our brand used to be about sport. These guys used to pitch to professional athletes only, but that is changing now. Now we're communicating with anybody who is adopting or embracing healthy lifestyle and well-being. Those visuals fill the screen and tell the story. You don't even really need the words at the top if you had someone presenting this to an audience. So we're going to increase our font size, we're going to use color to emphasize, and we're going to let our visuals fill the screen. Now, the second challenge of our billboards was they needed to communicate that message quickly. 60, 80, 120 kilometers an hour. The reality is your audience is working with short-term memory, and they're sitting in a busy presentation with lots going on. They're not paying attention to you 100% of the time. You need to also communicate your message quickly. And the easiest way to do this is get rid of the clutter. Kind of like this billboard does. I know exactly where you're looking, and you're probably having a bit of a chuckle at it. Well, that's great, but what we do with our business slides is we clutter them with all sorts of information. Here's a little activity we can do together. Let's find the clutter. Well, first of all, we have all these bullets that are there for the presenter, not for the audience. Then we have this really busy chart over on the other side with labels and tick marks and all sorts of colors going on. Then we have a logo at the bottom, we have the date at the bottom, we have the title of the presentation at the bottom. There is way too much going on in this slide to be able to communicate anything quickly. We can take this information and turn it into a more elegant chart that will communicate the core message very simply. Leave it to the presenter to provide some of the context or the extra detail. This is what our after slide looks like. Now we know the story is about Ajax. We've shown that with our gold line. We've cleaned up all those grid lines and tick marks, and we've gotten rid of any of the labels that we don't need. We've removed the logo, we don't have the date, and we don't have the title of the presentation anymore. We have managed to communicate a message quickly. Now, we've also done something else with this slide, and that takes us to our third principle: tell them what it means. If they are going to remember what we said long after we said it, we need to make that message meaningful. And we did that in our last slide. Instead of a generic title, we had a really nice statement at the top that told part of the story. Now they want to know what you're going to say next about that story. Very similar to what Adina Realty does here with their billboard. They don't make us guess what they're trying to tell us. They just tell us we're helping 23,000 buyers into new homes every year. Don't leave your audience guessing. Once again, they're working with short-term memory. They have a lot going on as well as this presentation. You don't want to make them do any heavy lifting. So we're just going to tell them what it means. This approach to slide design is called the assertion evidence approach. A couple of engineering professors at Penn State University decided one year, students are not going to present slides anymore with those generic headings. We're going to teach them this approach to slide design. They have since published research in the International Journal of Engineering Education that shows that the assertion evidence approach to slide design helps audiences to understand and remember exactly what we're trying to do here. So what do we mean by assertion evidence approach to slide design? Well, let's take a look at this slide. Pretty humdrum, not a lot going on. Yeah, there is. The audience has a lot going on. They're trying to figure out what does market research challenges mean. Then they're starting to read all these bullet points and they're desperately trying to put them all together while you're probably reading those bullet points to them. It's crazy. They can't remember any of it. So we're going to take this typical slide and we'll use the assertion evidence approach. This is what it can look like. That generic title that we had, Market Research Challenges, becomes a statement that has meaning to it. Our clients need quality data. All of those bullet points that we're trying to describe how many people don't use our services, how many people do use our services, how many people might need our services, we can synthesize all of that ourselves and communicate it with this very simple chart. We've used color to emphasize, we've increased our font size, we've let the visual pretty much fill the screen. It's very clear that 62% of our target market don't use a professional research firm. Guess what? That's who we want to go after. So think of it this way. Assertions at the top of your slide are kind of like newspaper headlines. If all you did with a newspaper was read the headlines on a single day, you'd have a pretty good idea of what was going on in the world that day. Because newspapers don't do what you're seeing right now. They don't put a headline up that says vaping fluid update or accident overview. It's not how newspapers operate. They want to draw you in and they want to tell you what it means really quickly. So these longer headlines are what we see typically at the top of our news stories. That's exactly what your audience needs from you at the top of your slide. You will use more words, but those words will give you more traction with your audience. They won't have to do all the heavy lifting of trying to figure out what is she talking about. Another way to think about assertions is, could it be debated? Could you throw it to a debating team and have one side say, yes, I agree, and another side say, no, I don't? Then you know you have crafted a proper assertion. I love having assertions at the top of my slides because guess what? As the presenter, I can never forget my presentation. The Coles notes are right there for me. So not only is this going to help your audience, it's going to help you as well. So what do we do with the rest of the slide? That big part of the slide that's sitting empty? Well, that is where we put our evidence, our visual evidence that proves that that assertion is true. This could be a diagram, it could be a graph or a chart, it could be numbers that fill the screen, or it could be a powerful and meaningful picture. This frees you up to just tell the story of the slide. Now you get to use your assertion as a launching point to describe the visual evidence you are showing your audience. I guarantee you this is going to create a more enjoyable experience for you as well as for them. When we're telling our audience what it means, that is essentially what we're doing. We need to tell the story of the data. We don't want to put all the pressure on the audience to figure out what that data means. I'm going to give you an example. Take a look at this table. Now, what do you think it's trying to describe? You may not even be there yet. You may not have finished reading all the information in the table. And maybe 20-25 seconds has gone by. Maybe a few more seconds. Do you have it yet? How much more efficient and effective would this have been if I'd just shown you the picture of the glass? We get to the meaning a lot quicker when we put the onus on ourselves to tell the story. So we have 3 principles here. Get their attention, unclutter the message, and tell them what it means. Anytime you sit down to create your PowerPoint slides, remember those 3 principles. Now, in the examples that I've shown you, I've also talked a little bit about graphs and charts throughout this video. You have a longer section in your workbook, and we've included a handy go-to guide that is going to tell you which chart to choose depending on how you want to show your data. I encourage you to take a look and have a read of this section. All right, last billboard. And actually, this isn't a billboard. This is a bus stop ad that was installed in downtown Vancouver. What does this tell you about 3M's security glass? I don't even think I need to answer the question. We are all arriving to the same conclusion. It's pretty likely this glass can't be broken. And in fact, people showed up and tried. They went down with tire irons, chains, hammers, sledgehammers, whatever they could find to try and break it. Now, 3M did have some security guards around, but the glass didn't break. So point taken. If you want security glass, you want to be talking to 3M. This bus stop ad achieves everything we've talked about. It got people's attention. There was nothing in there that didn't need to be in there to communicate the message. It was uncluttered, and it immediately communicated the meaning. By the way, only the top layer was real money. The rest of it was fake. So now you have 3 principles to use when you're building your PowerPoint slides. You don't have to be a graphic designer. You don't have to spend hours slaving over this stuff. You just need to help the audience to understand and remember. That is the good, the bad, and the ugly of visuals.